So, the next one is even more significant. The next subject we're going to talk about is communication. Now, communication. It is the bedrock of how we interact with people. Communication is our methods, our mechanisms where we can take ideas from our head, which are abstract. They're thinking, right? They're just abstract. And somehow getting another person to understand what it is that we are thinking. And there are many, many mechanisms, tools to use for communication. And these are skills that you must develop, particularly the first two I'm going to mention. Written and oral communication. That means writing, grammar, sentence structure, being able to get your ideas clearly down in words. Because if you can't do that, nobody's going to understand what it is that you're trying to communicate, right? So that's written. Oral communication, verbal. Oftentimes this is the most difficult for people because they're afraid to stand up and speak if there's more than a couple of people. They sort of freeze up because they're afraid of what people will think of them if they say something wrong or awkward. But again, you've got to put your egos in your back pocket, stand up with courage, and say what you need to say. Whatever people think of that is not your problem. You say your truth the best you know how in the area that you're discussing, that you're trying to communicate with. And when I communicate with someone, like particularly an idea, there's a little trick that I use to see if my communication was received and understood. Remember, what's the use of talking if the person who you're talking to doesn't get it? How do you know they got it? The first thing I do is I say, did you understand what I said? Did you understand it? Number one, but don't stop there. Number two, can you summarize for me what I just said? You see, that is called, in the psychology arena, it's called active listening. Where they're going to, in effect, parrot back to you what you said. Only then can you be sure that what you transmitted, they not only received, but they understood. Critical part of communication is getting feedback. Write that down. Critical part of communication is getting feedback. Did you understand? Can you summarize what I said? Okay, now I want you people to listen. My throat is not real good, so you guys got to listen carefully. If you don't understand a word, raise your hand immediately, okay? Because then I won't have to go through the whole thing. Okay, what it says is in communication, you must get feedback from the other person. And how you get that feedback is you ask them first, did you understand what I said? 95% of the time, by the way, they'll shake their head up and down and say yes. But when you ask them, can you summarize what I just said? All of a sudden, silence. How many times have we seen this? But you cannot continue until you are sure that that person not only heard but understood. Because once you say something, and if that communication has multiple layers, and you're not sure whether they really understood the first layer, if you move on, it's just going to get further and further and further away from clear understanding. So at every step, every link in the communications chain, verify. Write those down. When I talk about these things, I'll say key words like get feedback, verify. Jot those down immediately. Don't wait for me to say, what was that? And then I have to say it over again. Okay? So we hear specific nouns or adverbs, whatever, write them down. You can fill in the blanks later, but at least you'll understand, it'll hit your memory later on. Now, in communication, there are many different tools that we can use to support communication, right? We can use books, we can use newspapers, we can use radios, magazines, TVs. It's almost an infinite variety of tools that we can use in communication. And we will cover those later on in this class. Because, particularly in this 21st century, the number of tools that we use for communication has gone completely out of control. So many new things that we have to learn if we want to get our point across, if we want to get what's in our head into one or many people. So this is just the first step in understanding what communication is all about, and we'll discuss more of that as we go into what kind of tools can we use to apply. And